welcome Mr. Bolton.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me here today, Nina. And several of you have heard me talk about the projects that we've had going on, the partnerships we've had going with Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services and Dr. Mike Browder, who's here today. And today is going to be a little different. I'm going to do a little bit of a history, and then as we go through that, tell you some of the things that we learned early on, some of the mistakes we made, and some of the things that were successful, coming all the way up to present. As Nina said, I've graduated from Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina in 1981. Immediately went to pursue my master's in business administration from University of South Carolina, graduated in 1983 with a focus in production, inventory, and financial management. Nothing about systems. Okay? Indeed, in the early 90s, computerized systems were there, but those were different people that handled those. In 1983, went to work for a company named J.P. Stevens in Greenville, South Carolina. That was a major textile producer, produced sheets, towels, all that sort of stuff. And somehow or another got involved in production planning, and then got involved in having to design production planning systems. So my first experience was actually on the ground. After about 4 years of doing that and enjoying actually coordinating 67 manufacturing facilities, I decided that I wanted to go into consulting for myself. And at first that scared me, so I said, well, I'll go with another small firm, and joined a firm in Greenville, South Carolina called New Technology, which at the time was leading edge training, a leading edge training company that had contracted with University of Tennessee and Clemson University, University of Virginia, and University of Kentucky to travel around doing personal computer training seminars. And y'all are way too young for those, but back in the day, you would go to a hotel and have 20 people set up and do a full day training on a spreadsheet program or a database program or just how to use a PC. And people would pay good money for that. Now you can get that virtually anywhere. But in any case, we did a lot of traveling, traveled all over the country. As I've told Dr. Zuckery before, we would jump in a van that had 20 computers in it on Sunday night, drive to Miami, Florida, set up for Monday morning, do 5 days of training classes, jump back in the van Friday evening and drive back to Greenville, South Carolina Friday night. So that was a very tiring thing. But during the time, started learning more and more about computer software and computer programming. So in 1987, I actually left New Technology and went with became a partner in a firm in Greenville, South Carolina. So my first true partnership was in a company called Computer Knowledge Incorporated, which had a training side and a programming side, and I headed the programming side. And I'm not sure how many partnerships people have been involved in, but there are equal partnerships and unequal partnerships. And in this particular situation, the business that I was heading up within about 3 years became 80% of the revenue. The 4 other partners who were taking equal salary, equal pay, equal everything were generating about 20% of the revenue. So it ended up being somewhat of an unequal scenario on who was doing the work and who was getting the benefit. So in 1991, early 1991, we decided to split that partnership up. And quite frankly, if you would have asked me if I would have ever been in a partnership again, I would have said no. It was not a good breakup. There was certainly fighting going on, legal issues, things of, this is mine, this is yours, the battles of any partnership, just like a marriage. Okay? But in 1991, I did found Enhanced Systems Consulting, actually founded it in Greenville, South Carolina, with one client. So I had one client to call my own. Started business, and within 6 months had added 5 employees and had grown to 2 clients. Okay? And started the foundation of a company today that we're very proud of. The fact that 97% of our business is non-contract, non-purchase order related. So what's that mean? It means our customers, repeat customers, will call us and say, what's it going to take to? And we'll do some legwork and say that's going to take 4 weeks, or that's going to take 6 weeks, or that's going to take 6 months, or an hour, whatever the case is. They approve it, we do it, we bill them, and they pay. So roughly 3% is the exception on that do have a contract, a true scope of work, Many of our scopes of work that you may have studied are very fluid in that our customers aren't sure what they want until they see it. So we take the adage of a rapid application development. We like to say we want to throw something up against the wall and see what sticks quickly. So get feedback to the customer and have them say, no, I really like it this color, or I really like it in this order, or I really like it this. Our goal is that the customer adopts and eventually believes that the software is theirs. Okay? That's when we feel we've done our best job. So that took a lot of learning to not throw out the baby with the bathwater. By that, so 3% of the time we've had issues with a billing issue or customer issue or a bankruptcy. Okay? Bankruptcies are not fun, but where a client's gone bankrupt. But 97% of the time we haven't had any issues at all. So we're going to continue that model and have continued it today. And certainly with new customers, there's more negotiation and more contract, but existing repeat customers, they contact whoever our key team lead is and work out a lot of the details, and then we go to work and do the business. In 1995, again, no partnerships, but several clients, had a client that came to me and said, Matthew, I want to buy your company. And so we've been in business 4 years, and we'd been working with them, actually had 4 people working on that contract for about 2.5 years. And I looked at him, I said, John, it's not for sale. And he said, but you didn't even ask me about price. And I said, well, let me understand the scenario. You want to buy my company so you can have the resources dedicated to your company, right? Yeah. And I said, then you're going to require that I work for you for 2 years probably. And then we're going to fight, so you're going to get sick of me. He said, yeah, I'd probably require that too. And then I'm going to have to go out and start all over because I like what I'm doing. And so he said, so you don't even want to talk about money? I said, no, not yet. I said, come to me when I'm 55, 60, 65, and he won't anymore. But and I might talk about it, but at that point in time, no. Why? Well, I was fortunate enough to start a business that I enjoyed, that I could take anywhere I wanted to take it. I mean, within reason, that I could make mistakes with, that I could grow with, and that I could evolve with. The one thing we learned about technology in the 90s and in the 2000s and even currently is the rate of change is ever increasing. So every time we think we've created something new, we find out that we've created something very old. Okay? And we're getting ready to recreate it. And we'll talk about that more as kind of go through the genealogy and the history of the company. In 1992, again, spoiled rotten, I said I wanted to move back to East Tennessee, which is where I'm from. So I'd grown up in Johnson City, left for South Carolina in '77, and in '92 said, hey, I want to get back to East Tennessee, I want to get back to Johnson City. So I moved the company from South Carolina here. I actually still have employees in South Carolina, and just love the East Tennessee area. And then in 1994, actually, and this is, you all won't have this opportunity, maybe you will, I actually had my first class with Dr. Zuckery. So it wasn't really a class. He asked me to come in and evaluate students as part of the entrepreneurial program. Little did I know that each and every time he was trying to teach me, and each and every time I felt guilty about not doing more. But so in 1994, Andy and I started our relationship with my company, students, evaluating students, and evaluating program. The whole time a huge learning experience for myself and my company. So we continued working on automation projects. And as I mentioned, the rate of change has changed hugely in the technology industry. In 1994, we could take a software development tool, any programming tool you wanted to, and we could put a stake in the ground and say, we're going to use this for 5 years. I mean, that was how long it was before an upgrade came out. Okay? Today, it's like 16, 18 months. So before we can learn it, there's a new version out. So the dynamics, the change, I tell my people, I don't care if you know anything, I just care if you can learn, and learn quickly, and make money at it. So that's several of you have heard me say we are a for-profit company. If we didn't make money, part of the fund would be gone. Not all of it, but part of the fund would be gone. So as that rate of change has consistently gotten faster and faster and faster, our challenges have gotten more and more and more. You know, went throughout the 90s without any major partnerships until 1998, when we actually got involved in the utility industry with Duke Energy at the time, Duke Power at the time, Puget Sound Energy, and NiSource, which is no longer exists, but 3 companies that were doing contractor referral management. I don't know whether, I know BTES and Dr. Browder are involved in that now, but it's basically where you call the utility and say, okay, who's a certified heat pump contractor, or who can put in windows, or who can do an energy audit. And this was in the late 1990s when the large companies were trying to tackle that, and we actually developed the software that managed that whole network. And it's kind of where we learned to fudge a little bit on projects and presentations. We had at the time, and you all, again, never seen that, but a fax server. What's that? It's where the computer calls it and says, send somebody a fax. So it still does it over a phone line, okay? So that was the technology we were deploying. Email was not prevalent. Most of the people we were communicating with didn't have email, okay? So we said, okay, we'll fax the dealer their lead information. Well, in our demo in Charlotte with Duke Power and with the executives of Duke Power, it wouldn't work. So we literally had, we told them, we said, well, today we're going to use the Roger fax. And what that meant was a guy that worked for me named Roger was standing on the 4th floor next to an HP printer, a laser printer, and when it printed out, he put it in a fax machine, keyed in the phone number, and it went. So, you know, the demonstration went perfectly. They never asked what a Roger fax was. Okay? Never asked. But within 3 weeks, we had the technology solved. So sometimes there might be a little smoke and mirrors, okay? But only if you're confident that you can solve it. Okay? And more times than not, we've been very confident. Anyway, we got involved in a partnership with a company called Synergistic Systems out of California, which was a huge leap for me. You know, anything thinking all the way out on the left coast, I just didn't go that far. But we got involved with the utility industry a little bit in preparing and disseminating documentation, energy documentation, so forth and so on. That lasted a couple of years and amicably broke up. Okay, so it wasn't a real success. We started a company called Energy Link LLC, but it didn't really go anywhere. So that brings us into the 2000s, the era of Y2K. Again, that's kind of sad. I think probably most people in here don't remember Y2K too much. Okay, a huge turning point in technology because everything was supposed to stop. The 2000 century mark was going to cause all the computers in the world to stop. It was going to bring down the electric grid. Everything that had a computer in it was going to break because it didn't recognize the century. Everything was just based on a 2-digit year. Consultants made a huge amount of money. Customers, municipalities, organizations, universities replaced everything they had between 1996 and 2000. Companies like Duke Power spent over $8 million sending their source code to India to get it changed. So they sent their source code to India, had it updated, had it sent back in, and nothing happened. Okay. That was somewhat unique in that we had clients that said, you have to be on site. New Year's Day, year 2000, you have to be physically on our sites. So we had 6 people in various different manufacturing sites who had absolutely nothing to do. So thankfully by lunchtime they said we could leave, but it was really a lot of hype. A lot of good things were done, but a lot of hype. And so we made it through the Y2K thing. The great news about it was it brought a lot of business to the table. So a lot of customers were doing things during 97, 98, 99. All of a sudden, 2000, 2001, they weren't, because they'd done most of them before 2000 before 2000. So I went through a little slow time. Not a real slow time, but a little slow time. And in 2001, Dr. Andy Zuckery and I talked, and we actually had and engaged our first graduate student team. And the student team was to work with Enhanced Systems on a marketing plan. We felt like we'd always been good service providers, but terrible marketers. Didn't know how to sell to a customer, didn't know how to market to a customer, but great when they presented a problem and we had something we could go solve. So as long as it was thrown over the board to what does the solution need to be, we had some creative people. Okay? If they had to go cold call or knock on a door or call somebody on the phone, we didn't have it. We weren't the people to do that. So we started talking about a marketing plan. And at the same time, we decided to reach out and try to hire salespeople. So we hired a couple of people in the sales role that were supposed to do that actually had done that for various companies. One had been with Coca-Cola for several years in Georgia and had been quite accomplished in that market space. Over the next 3 years, we found that failed miserably. And the reason was they weren't solution sellers. They weren't talking about the customer solution. They were fine as long as they could sell a product. So if they could sell a Coke in a can, they were okay. If they had to sell Coke with everything you could have it with, they were totally out of kilter. Okay? So when we talked about software, it was oftentimes trying to figure out what the solution could come from. And I like to tell the story. We got a project with St. Lucie Nuclear Power Plant in Florida. It's part of Florida Power and Light. They approached us and said, we need something to track our regulatory compliant procedures. I said, what? Every one of our procedures, all our steps we go through. Regulatory procedures in the nuclear industry are extremely important. We've got to track them from creation to when they're put into the vault. And I said, you put them in a vault? I said, yes, we physically put them in a vault, print them and put them in a vault. I said, well, tell me, what are you tracking? Well, we track the person that writes it. We track that it's been proofread. We track that it's been reviewed by management. We track that it's been voted on. And we track that it's gone to the vault. I said, okay. That sounds just like tracking just about anything else to me. You know, we've got some things that track materials through manufacturing, you know, track it through a process step and this, and I think we can do it. And within about 6 weeks, we'd taken a system that we'd done before and made it a regulatory compliance system for the nuclear industry. Unfortunately, and this is where I learned a lot about pricing, we priced it based upon what it was going to take us to do it, not based upon the market price. And we found out that our price was 1/3 the nearest competitor. So we kind of missed the ball there. But you know, so we started trying to do some things with the student team to say, okay, well, what is the market? Who is our market, and what should our market be? And that was in the spring of 2001. Andy, I'm not sure you remember that one, but that was the first graduate student team. And they submitted a report in the end of April 2001, which I still have, okay? And we've started using some of the ideas, most notably internal communications. One of our things that we kept finding is that as long as somebody was on a project, they knew everything about it, but if they were on another project, they didn't, so they felt left out. So we have consistently tried to keep people informed about all the different projects that are going on. Okay? We don't do a good job of it, but we're trying to, so that everybody in the company keeps involved and keeps having input. Okay? Anybody can jump in and have input on any particular project. Okay? And oh, by the way, as we go through this, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Okay? So we evolve into the early 2000s. In 2003, I was fortunate enough to sit on the review panel for Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services for a student team evaluating whether fiber to the home was a good idea for Bristol. I must admit, at the time, 2003, I wasn't sure whether it was or not. Didn't know. But I thought the students had done an excellent job on the presentation, the facts, etc. Didn't know whether, I had no idea whether Bristol was actually going to do it or not. But it was quite entertaining and quite an honor for those students and also for the reviewers that roughly 2 years later, Bristol had embarked full scale on implementing that program. Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services had. and today has gone through every innovation and every renovation of the technology that they can possibly go through, and have kept up with the technology, which is a tough battle, but they chose some good standards there. That became important to us and to our strategy of trying to diversify business. People talk about diversifying their business and leveraging. Don't get all in one market space. Don't get all in this market space. We had been 60%, we had 60% of our business in textile and textile-related industries. That's fabric production, clothing production, all that sort of stuff, all the stuff that started going offshore. Okay? And we actually were doing some things in Honduras and El Salvador, and had people in Honduras during an earthquake, and they came back and said they'd never go back, and I really couldn't blame them. We learned lessons about that. We developed systems that were bilingual in Spanish and in English, and went to El Salvador to implement them, and the management immediately told us to turn off the Spanish. And we said, what? But all your people speak Spanish. But they're worth more as contractors if they speak English. So turn off the Spanish. And we said, well, somebody spent a bunch of money making this bilingual. And we ended up turning it off. But we didn't ask. I mean, one of the problems was we did not ask the target, didn't ask the people using it, hey, what do we need here? We actually asked the people that were hiring the contractors. So I missed the target on that one. But so we evolved through the project, said we wanted to diversify. And we thought about diversifying into utilities. We'd had some work done with several of those in part of the partnerships and part of the Duke Energy, and had some good success there. Had been exposed to Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services. And then we got the opportunity to go into the medical field. And so I thought, gosh, medical, that's a great place to be. We got to work with a major East Tennessee laboratory owned by one of the local hospitals. Developed a courier network that managed all the couriers traveling throughout town, picking up specimens, picking up tests, all this sort of stuff. Actually started developing a pretty core piece of software that would do integration end to end. By that, it allowed multiple systems to talk to each other. It was a translator, so it would translate this system's language to this system's language and do it seamlessly. And lo and behold, had 4 people basically dedicated to this project, and had just sat down for a 12-month planning session to plan out the next year, had them committed for the next year, and a month and a half later, the laboratory declared bankruptcy. And the laboratory owed us $156,000. And so went to our employees at the time. They said, well, we diversified into medical and it didn't work. I said, well, it didn't. And I said, what was worse than the $56,000 that they owed us was we've got 4 full-time employees that are dedicated to that project for the next 12 months that we've got to figure out something to do with them. Okay. So the injury on the bankruptcy was two-sided, and we did. So we recovered from that. And then we come forward to 2006 when the economy slows down, starts slowing down, 2006, 2007. And that's when all of a sudden we had time. And time is one of those terrible, grateful things. When you have it and you don't want it, you don't have anything to do, it's very frustrating. When you don't have it and want it, it's extremely frustrating again. Okay? What happened between 2007 and 2010 is we rekindled many partnerships, or restarted many partnerships. Some out of looking for other product lines to get into, some out of looking for other products to get into, other markets to get into, other technologies to get into. But the whole reason that we did it was because we had time. And I don't know whether it's true or not, but I think, and I'd like to see some statistics on this, it's my perception that during economic downtimes is when we see our greatest innovation, because the innovators have time to innovate. Sometimes they don't have resources, but sometimes they have time to have creative ideas and new things. So we actually got involved starting in 2007 over the next 4 years in 4 different initiatives. Some by accident, some on purpose. The first, in the collaboration with Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services, actually started as a core of a collaboration with ETSU. In working with ETSU and Oak Ridge National Labs, we had a particular product that had been grown by ETSU for Oak Ridge that we figured we could adapt to a particular application within BTES. We took resources from ETSU and resources from Enhanced Systems and resources from BTES to actually, over a 7-month period, actually prove that concept and get it working. And we thought, gosh, this is great. We might be able to take this other places. And we started reviewing it and said, well, you know, what it's doing really isn't that sophisticated. It's important, but it's really leveraging something that I think other places exist. So we started searching for something that needed solving, that didn't exist or didn't exist economically, and that companies, distributors like BTES needed, and that could be a leader going that way. And thus we started on the small business innovation research track to figure out how to do funding. I think several of you all have heard us talk or heard squawking about the small business innovation research grants, but it's a 2-phase program. The first phase is $150,000 to prove a concept. As we were writing that particular grant application, my company had never done a grant application. I really didn't know how to do one. We went through the process of actually testing many of the things we were doing on the Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services site. So we actually already knew we could do it. But the first part of the grant is proof of concept, $150,000 to go out and prove you could do something. And so at the end of that grant, we had proven that we could do it. We had actually partially implemented it. So we already had a pilot going and in operation. So I said, well, let's go for the grant number 2, SBIR Phase II, $1 million grant. Okay? Again, jointly with ETSU, BTES, and Enhanced Systems Consulting, we applied for the grant and were awarded that grant last August. That's a 2-year grant that is supposed to get it ready to be implemented. Not implemented, it's supposed to get it ready to be implemented. It's called commercialization. And during this process, you learn all the kinds of things about working with grants and working with government. I got very intrigued by when we had to sign up for it. And there's one particular site in the federal government contractor site where you have to list all your contacts. So you have to tell them who in your company are all the contacts. So I said, well, who's the primary contact? Well, it's me, Matthew Bolton. Who's the technical contact? Well, I'm the lead investigator, so I'm the technical contact. Well, who's the administrative contact? Well, we're a small company. You know, we do most of that outside, so I guess I'm the administrative contact. And they said, well, who's the billing contact? I said, well, okay, that's me too. Well, at the end of it, we had 5 different contacts. All of them had to have a different email address. Okay? All of them had to have a different login. All of them had to have a different password. And at the bottom of it had this quip that said, by checking here, you promise not to write down these passwords anywhere. I lied. Okay. Okay. I mean, so 5 different passwords to get into that, whatever the contact is for that particular site. Don't know who developed it. Don't want to know. Don't want to hire them. But it got us into the grant process, and thankfully, once we actually got in it, the administration, the use of it is actually pretty easy. So it's tough up front, and indeed for our SBIR Phase I, we actually hired a person to help us write it, somebody who had written one before. Okay. Again, thanks to Dr. Zuckery. He had a contact that had some time, and we hired him for 2 weeks to do nothing but work on our SBIR Phase I. Because Dr. Browder and I knew that we wouldn't. I mean, we wouldn't take, or I knew I couldn't, we wouldn't have the time to write it. Subsequently, when we came to Phase II, we hired a recent graduate that had just come out of ETSU, and his first project was to work with me on writing our Phase II grant. And he spent about 3.5 months writing it. It's a good bit more extensive. So sometimes in small companies, those resources aren't there to do that kind of writing, but we've been more than happy with the ability to find resources and use the resources that came out of here. It's also important to note that through that partnership with ETSU, our Phase I grant, 30% of the content came from previous research done by ETSU student teams. Okay. By our Phase II, 70% of the content came from student and student-related teams. So we think, and we hope to continue, we have leveraged the student team and hopefully the student experience such that we get a huge win. We get information we couldn't have otherwise gotten. We get information on other utilities that perhaps they wouldn't have answered us directly. You know, if Matthew Bolton would have called from ETSU, you get one answer. Okay? If Morgan Walker calls and says, I'm doing a student project, you get a totally different answer. Okay? So it's the dynamic of who they open the door for. Okay? And of course, this semester we have a graduate student project continuing on that is actually helping us develop benchmarks. Well, let's go back to the partnership. So we've developed a partnership between ETSU, BTES, and Enhanced Systems. And you know, in all truthfulness, we're now in the formulation of the legal partnership. So we agreed to a conceptual process and a conceptual partnership about 2.5, 3 years ago, and now we're working on, okay, how do we legalize this thing? Well, what's it look like? What are the agreements that need to be in place? So we're working on those right now, and have full faith that within the, I don't know, maybe we'll get a student team working on that first semester next year. But it's important to all entities, because BTS has its objectives, Enhanced Systems has its objectives, ETSU has its objectives, okay? And we think that all of those can be very complementary, okay? And as long as we make profit, you know, BTS and ETSU can have any objectives they want. That's not totally true, but okay. So another entity came about somewhat as part of this, and somewhat as an offshoot of our medical experience, an integration engine. And about 3.5 years ago, we partnered again through a contact with Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services with one of their providers in Alabama to develop a piece of software that would tie any kind of system together. And it was important because it needed to be in the utility industry, and it needed to support cable, internet, telephone integration. Now, what's that mean? It's a piece of software that if you go to you know, your cable service provider and say, I want HBO, it's what tells the delivery system to send you HBO and that you've got enough credit for it. Okay? So it's the middleware that plugs everything together. And if you don't have that middleware, there's some person, you know, we used to call that sneaker net, you know, because it'd be somebody with sneakers having to run across the room, but it's going to be some person that has to take on that activity. So we've developed automation that not only hooks to the triple play side, which is where it was originally targeted, but also goes all the way to the electric meter, water meter, gas meter, or whatever a meter might be. And it adopted standards that are prevalent in the utility industry and in the communications industry. And we've got this installed in 2 locations now. It was in development for about 2 years. Spent close to about $750,000 in development, but it sells for $250,000. So it's an important cog to somebody that needs that sort of tool set. And we think that the market space it's not exploding, 70% are doing nothing, but we think that 30% of the utility industry market is at least having some smart grid initiative, some smart grid plan, some smart grid topic. Quickly, how many people are technology related and how many people are business related? Or both? Technology. Okay, so business. Okay. The reason I ask that is you know, oftentimes we get involved with things that you just don't know, you're not sure why it hadn't been done. Okay, and your first response might be, well, that has been done. It had to be. Okay. How many people are familiar with banking procedures? Anybody work in a bank? Okay. And in a banking scenario, every bank by regulation, by compliance regulation, has a procedure for how they open in the morning. Okay. And they have a procedure for how they close in the afternoon. And this is all regulatory. So in order to be compliant, they're supposed to follow these procedures. It seems that these procedures haven't been changed or modified since 1947. Okay. And just to give you just a little background of what these are, typically in the morning, the first person in the bank is called the opener. They send one person in to clear the bank. They unlock the door, lock the door behind them. They go in and walk around the bank, make sure nobody's in there, nobody's hiding in a bathroom, yada, yada, yada. Then come back and set what's called the all clear signal. The all clear signal's typically been something as simple as a shade in the drive-through pulled down, and an umbrella moved to the other side of the door, a color-coded card in the window, or one we found had a ceramic squirrel at the door that they moved to the other side. Okay? Real sophisticated. Okay? It is supposed to be a non-obvious, changeable signal that somebody doesn't pick up. Why? Because that's a target for what's called a morning glory robbery, where a robber actually takes hostages. First thing in the morning, the employees get there at 7:30, the bank doesn't open until 9. So they literally take hostages in the morning, keep people coming in and have hostages. And several years ago, there was a bank down towards Knoxville that actually had 7 people killed. Not sure why. They assumed that somebody recognized the robber, but there were 7 employees that came in and they were bound, tied hands behind their back. Well, I was approached 3.5 years ago by a banker in Virginia who had gone through a morning glory robbery. He had failed compliance, failed audit, and said there's got to be a better way. Okay? So we devised a product called All Clear System. And All Clear System, if I can get it up here. Okay, is a totally unique and new product in the market space that gives every employee a communication device. So every employee has a little key fob with a display on it, and they press a button, and based upon whatever the bank wants to use, it gives them a word, and that word may be a color, it may be clear, it may be, you know, blue monkey, it can be anything that the particular institution wants. But that is a signal for, is the bank clear or is it not? And if it's not, don't go in. Okay? Stay away from it. The intent is to keep people out of the bank. So we've developed this from scratch. We went out, they first said, well, do you think there's a device out there? And we said, well, I said, there's got to be. There's got to be a radio frequency display that you can use to display a message. And we found that there were a few, but at a price point 5 times more than we thought the market would take. We were looking at a price point between $50 and $75. The cheapest thing we could find was $250. So that got us on another search to see, okay, who could build these? Okay, if we engineered them, if we came up with them, who could build them? And we searched. We found a company in Oregon. Okay, that had a radio components and had all of that sort of stuff, and lo and behold, talked to them, and they gave us an estimate to build a prototype. And then we talked to a company in Gray that said, hey, we can do it. And thankfully, we chose the company in Gray because there's been a lot of iterations. But we ended up designing the device, designing the radio, designing the communications, designing and programming the firmware that's physically on it. for all the communications, as well as the computer side. The system's now launched. It went to market actually last August. We now have 16 banks installed, and we still have no competition. So we're pretty excited about it. But that's the banker. That's the one. His name's Kevin Mullins. He was actually going to come today, but he got hung up in Roanoke. He actually was in a bank robbery when two people had quit work after the robbery. One went out on workman's comp. The other went out on a disability leave because they'd had a gun held to their head. And then even after that, after the bank robbery, he failed the audit. Okay. So unique piece of software called All Clear System that we're pretty excited about. That's a true repeatable product. Okay. But it only means something if you're in the banking industry. Okay. So far, any questions?
Do you develop like any kind of apps as well that would work like complement or coordinate with the computer system, like any kind of delivery apps? Like someone wants something delivered, so they go onto their iPhone, say, and do you develop stuff like that?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we found over, again, 25 years ago, if we said we were developing on a technology, it was going to be one technology. I mean, it was going to be a computer running X operating system. Today, when we develop applications, it transcends all of that. So, I mean, not only does it need to run under Windows, it needs to run on a MacBook, it needs to run on an iPhone, it needs to run on a Droid, it needs to run on a handheld barcode scanner. So it ends up that those apps and applets get out there everywhere. And then the more devices you've got, the more distribution of those becomes a huge issue. So for example, in the All Clear software, it is architected where if we sell it and you go plug it in at a bank, as soon as it comes on, it reaches out to the cloud, reaches out to us, and does a full install of all the software. Nobody's got to touch it. Okay. Likewise, all updates are automatic. Now, as we like to tell our investors, conversely, if they don't pay their bill, I just have to go say, okay, this computer is no longer active. So it's completely automated distribution and data end to end and to devices and to the fobs. But you have to. I say you have to. I mean, that's the market space. The market space is not just on a PC laptop. You know, we're predicting that tablets will outsell computers by the end of next year. That tablet sales will be larger than computer sales. And that doesn't surprise me a whole lot. Okay? Except my eyes are getting worse, so I still need a bigger screen. But
is that going to change any of your all's how you initially planned maybe 5 years ago for things to go, or does that change how you develop software or these programs?
So the question was, does that change how we approach things? Yes, changes everything. Because it totally changes the real estate. And with the ability to zoom and unzoom with all the touch panels, it changes your whole dynamic of how you use it. Likewise, touch screen changes the way you would set up navigation. We found in manufacturing environments touch screen to be much more effective than a keyboard. Okay? Because they're looking at the screen and touching as opposed to looking at the screen, looking down at the keyboard, looking at the screen, looking at the keyboard. So we've done several things that are touch screen in manufacturing to activate machines, turn things on, turn things off, and taking the mouse out. That's another place they have to look down, then look up. And that's been due to the ergonomic concerns, but as well as safety concerns. Don't want hands and things flying around when you're in a cutting machine. Okay. But that's changed very rapidly. And as I said earlier, we've talked about the rate of change. What I can't tell you and have no idea is what's going to be launched in 2 years and what its name's going to be and how quickly is it going to get adopted and what company is going to be the next shooting star. and which one are we no longer going to hear about? Okay? You know, if you go through the technology history, I mean, there were companies that were absolutely shooting stars. Novell Incorporated was an absolute shooting star in the 90s, one of the first network suppliers for PCs in the market space. Most of us don't even know how to spell Novell now. They're actually still around, but very small. Okay? You may have heard of Lotus, the first, what the first, but the first major spreadsheet product that you know, now all you hear about is Excel. Numerous companies that have been shooting stars haven't adapted to the technology or haven't changed to the technology well and aren't here today, and others are. So Google's going great guns. How long will they go great guns? I don't know. Somebody's always shooting for them. Okay? Facebook's going, well, maybe they're not. Okay? They're going somewhere. They were going great guns. Okay? You know, Amazon was the hottest thing on the market spot. Still doing well, but not like they were. Okay? So I don't know what trends are going to come about, but I do know there's going to be a lot of them. We're going to see a lot more networking, and I think I heard at the last meeting, and Dr. Browder, you might have made the quote or heard the remark that said, internet access is going to become more important than electricity because it's becoming our only form of communication. I mean, it's becoming our telephone communication, it's becoming our, the text communication, it's becoming our email, it's becoming our business communication, it's becoming our way to collaborate. I mean, we have all our now, thankfully, many of our people work from home because they can use collaboration tools and share things, share documents, share anything they need. 20 years ago, that wasn't possible. Okay. So that will absolutely change it. And then one of the newest products that we've gotten into is a niche product in the, I say it's a niche product, a product in the utility industry as well. We worked with a company that did the billing services for cable, internet, and telephone. And they wanted it updated, and they wanted to do a new robust platform, Windows-based, with the graphical user interface, yada, yada, yada. What we did was we took that and we expanded that to where not only did it have the triple play components, but it also covered all the utilities. So it also has electricity, it also has natural gas, it also has water, it also has sewer, it has wastewater, garbage, now internet access, cable access, and telephone, all within a single billing package. The unique thing that we've done there is it's a la carte. So if you are only, we're positioning it now for a particular water utility that happens to be on an Indian reservation, but all they do is water. Okay? So they can buy the base module and just the water utility billing. Okay? To our knowledge, and we have the only product that transcends those two market spaces. There's going to be competition, but to our knowledge, nobody's doing it yet. There will be, but they're not doing it yet. We went after that market space, and I'm going to go back to, but for a couple of reasons. Many of the municipalities, utilities, public sector companies, going back to that Y2K thing, they did huge investments in IT in 1998, 99, and 2000. So much so that they didn't want to do anything for 10 years, some 12 years. So what we're seeing is a lot of revitalization in municipalities and in utilities to replace things. Okay? And we hope that accelerates. So we think that market space is opening up as we go. And again, with leaders in the industry like BTES and hopefully with institutions that can help like ETSU that are looking at new things that can only better our programs, we'll have even more opportunities as we go forward for software solutions. And then the final product that's part of the ETSU BTS Enhanced Systems Partnership, I'm going to give somebody a $100 reward if they can come up with a name. We call it Dynamically Controlled Electronic Management System. Nobody can say it, nobody can remember it. Okay, well, you've had it for, what, 3 semesters? So we've got to come up with a marketing name for it, and we're hoping to do that as part of this commercialization process. But what does it do? It's a unique product that measures, monitors, and controls the supply of electricity as well as the demand for that electricity within certain constraints. Now, why is that important? If you look at most of the initiatives that are out there, you know, your things like your lighting controls, your things like your heating controls where you can set your thermostat to come on all of them coming on at 4:45. Those are all demand side. They don't know anything about the supply side. They don't know anything about what's being generated. They don't know anything about, you know, is TVA having to go into peak power now? They don't know anything. They're just purely time devices. So as part of an investigation and a direction and working with some very capable electrical engineers and some people in the know, we said, well, wouldn't it be more beneficial if we had some idea what the supply was happening and things that we could do on the demand side? So we've configured a way that gives us a picture of both of those, such that if for some reason the supply is decreasing or we want it to decrease, we can actually shift electrical usage to a different point in time. The converse is the same. So if we need to consume more because we're generating too much, we can shift the demand into that period of time. Okay? And this is using a couple of devices right now, capacitors and water heaters, but it's still the knowledge of the network is the critical component, that we know what's going on within the network and within all the different parameters. So that's, you know, again, where the SBIR grant is coming back in to help us prove that, which was said we think we've already proven, and within the partnership actually helps us get into other market spaces. Okay? So those are the kind of the four bellwether products that as a result of having time between 2007 and 2010, we started developing different companies and different products and back into partnerships. The key to the partnerships that we have today are equal participation and understanding what the partners are going to do. As I mentioned earlier, you know, I started in a partnership in 1987 that didn't go well. It's because we didn't have that understanding. Okay? We never sat down and put that in place. So we had one gentleman who he's probably dead by now, but his idea when he was on the road, he liked to travel, and he thought it was okay to go buy a $60 bottle of wine and have the company pay for it every night. And we had another one that he basically would go to the store and buy a bag of apples and go back to his room, and he'd claim, you know, like $5 for supper. So we had one getting $90, $100 for supper, and one getting $5. And it kind of started getting people upset. It got me upset. Okay. So we said, well, we're going to make this fair. Everybody gets $28 per day, period. You can do whatever you want to, and you can do whatever you want to. But it's that sort of scenario that people didn't have an equitable feeling about it. They didn't feel like they were the same as somebody else that was taking advantage of a situation. So that's important for a partnership to work out. Those details going forward, and it evolves. Okay? The one thing we know about anything that we've got within these entrepreneurial partnerships or innovative partnerships or whatever we want to call them is that they're going to change. Okay? We don't know what the technology is going to do. We do know it's going to change. We just don't know where. And all of this is going to evolve as players evolve. Okay? So, questions? So I bored you long enough? Probably.